What if the person who could save your company wasn't in the boardroom, but behind the wheel of your car? This is the story of Noah James, a black company driver who became the unexpected hero in a CEO's darkest hour. Can a humble driver step up and lead a recovery that no one saw coming? If you're new, make sure to subscribe and join us in every new journey. The sleek black sedan glided through the morning traffic, its tinted windows concealing the two men inside. Behind the wheel sat Noah James, his eyes focused on the road ahead. In the back, George King, CEO of Skyline Networks, scrolled through his phone, preparing for another day at the top. For 10 years, Noah had been more than just George's driver. He was a confidant, a friend who knew the man behind the suit. Their easy banter filled the car, a testament to their bond. But neither man could have guessed that this ordinary morning was the calm before a storm that would turn their world upside down. As they neared the Skyline offices, a sense of unease settled over Noah. Something was about to change, and he couldn't shake the feeling that both their lives were about to take an unexpected turn. What would happen when the CEO's world crumbled, and the only person left standing was the man who'd always been in the background? The elevator doors opened, revealing a world where Noah James didn't quite fit. Or did he? As he followed George into the boardroom, the atmosphere shifted. What hidden dynamic between a CEO and his driver could make seasoned executives so uncomfortable? The truth would challenge everything they thought they knew about corporate hierarchy. At Skyline Networks, the day began like any other. Employees bustled about, phones rang, and the hum of productivity filled the air. But as Noah James stepped into the boardroom behind George King, an unusual tension settled over the room. The executives shifted in their seats, their discomfort palpable. Noah took his usual spot, not at the door as one might expect from a driver, but at the table itself. This wasn't a new arrangement. He'd been part of these meetings since Skyline's inception. Yet, even after all this time, some of the upper management couldn't seem to reconcile his presence. As George began the meeting, Noah noticed the sideways glances, the barely concealed frowns. He knew what they were thinking. What business did a driver have in a board meeting? And a black driver at that. But Noah had learned long ago to let their discomfort roll off his back. He was here because George wanted him here, and that was all that mattered. George's voice cut through the tension, commanding attention as he outlined the company's latest project. Throughout the presentation, he frequently turned to Noah, asking for input or clarification. It was clear that George valued Noah's opinion, treating him more like a trusted advisor than an employee. As the meeting progressed, Noah's contributions became more frequent. He offered insights into logistical challenges, suggested alternative approaches, and even challenged some of the executives' assumptions. With each comment, the room's initial discomfort seemed to fade, replaced by a grudging respect. Yet, not everyone was won over. After the meeting, Noah overheard two executives muttering as they left the room. "I don't care what George says," one whispered. "Having the help in our meetings just isn't right." George, who had also heard the comment, placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. "Don't let them get to you," he said quietly. "You're family, Noah, and family belongs here." The word family triggered a memory in Noah's mind. He thought back to a conversation he'd had with George years ago, not long after Skyline had taken off. They were in the car, stuck in traffic, when George had turned to him with an offer. "Noah," George had said, "you've been with me from the start. You know this business inside and out. How about we make it official? I want to offer you a position in the company. Something in operations, maybe?" Noah remembered how he'd smiled, touched by the offer, but certain in his response. "I appreciate that, George. I really do. But I'm happy where I am. Being your driver, being there when you need me, that's where I can do the most good." George nodded, understanding. The offer stands, Noah. Anytime you change your mind. Back in the present, Noah realized that his decision had been the right one. His role as George's driver allowed him a unique perspective, one that bridged the gap between the corporate world and the real world outside. It was a vantage point that proved invaluable time and time again. As the day wore on, Noah continued to be a fixture in meetings and discussions. He watched as George skillfully navigated the corporate waters, always keeping Noah close despite the occasional ripples of discontent from others. By the end of the day, as they prepared to leave the office, George turned to Noah with a tired smile. "You know, Noah," he said, "I don't think I could do this without you." Noah nodded, a sense of pride and purpose filling him. He knew his position was unconventional, his presence sometimes unwelcome, but he also knew that his loyalty to George and George's trust in him was something special, something that went beyond job titles and corporate hierarchies. The next morning, an unexpected visitor arrived at George's office. As hushed voices filtered through the door, Noah couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. What news would shatter the delicate balance they had worked so hard to maintain? George King sat behind his desk, his normally confident posture slightly slumped. Across from him, board member Sarah Thompson leaned forward, her voice low but intense. Noah, standing just outside the partially open door, couldn't help but overhear their conversation. "George, we need to talk about Noah," Sarah said, her tone a mix of concern and frustration. "The board is uncomfortable with how much you're involving him in company matters." George's response was firm. "Noah's been with me from the start. His insight is invaluable." "Be that as it may," Sarah countered, "he's still just a driver. It's not appropriate for him to be privy to sensitive business discussions." As Noah listened, he felt a twinge of unease. He'd always known some board members disapproved of his presence in meetings, but he hadn't realized the extent of their discomfort. He thought back to the previous day's meeting, recalling the sideways glances and hushed whispers. The conversation inside the office continued, growing more heated. "George, I'm not the only one who feels this way," Sarah said. "At least half the board thinks it's time for a change in leadership." Noah's heart sank. He'd suspected there was dissatisfaction among some board members, but he hadn't realized it had reached this level. The implications were clear. George's position as CEO was in jeopardy. Just then, George's voice rose, anger evident in his tone. "And what about our stock performance? I suppose that's my fault too?" Sarah's reply was measured but pointed. "The numbers don't lie, George. Our stock has taken a significant hit in the past quarter. As CEO, the responsibility ultimately falls on you." Noah felt a surge of protectiveness towards George. He knew how hard his friend had worked to build Skyline Networks from the ground up. To hear the board so quick to blame him for a temporary setback seemed unfair. As the conversation continued, it became clear that this wasn't just about Noah or the stock performance. There was a larger strategy at play. The board was systematically undermining George's authority, using any excuse to chip away at his leadership. Noah's mind raced. He wanted to burst into the office, to defend George and remind everyone of all he'd done for the company. But he knew that would only make things worse. Instead, he quietly stepped away from the door, his heart heavy with the knowledge of the challenges that lay ahead. Throughout the day, Noah watched George closely. To anyone else, the CEO appeared as composed and confident as ever. But Noah could see the strain in his eyes, the slight tension in his shoulders. George was carrying a heavy burden, and Noah was determined to help him bear it. As they drove home that evening, the usual easy banter between them was replaced by a weighted silence. Finally, George spoke. "Noah, I think we're in for some rough times ahead. Noah nodded, his eyes meeting George's in the rearview mirror. I heard some of your conversation with Sarah this morning, he admitted. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop. George waved off the apology. You have as much right to know what's going on as anyone. The board, they're not happy. With me, with you, with how I run things. We'll get through this, Noah said, his voice filled with quiet determination. We've faced challenges before. George smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. This is different, Noah. They're out for blood, and I'm not sure I have the fight left in me. Noah felt a surge of loyalty and protectiveness. Then I'll fight for you, he said simply. We're in this together, remember? As they pulled up to George's house, Noah made a silent vow. No matter what came next, he would stand by George's side. The road ahead might be rough, but they would face it together. The tension in the boardroom was palpable as George King entered, his usual confident stride noticeably hesitant. Sometimes, the greatest acts of loyalty emerge from the darkest moments. As George faced an unexpected confrontation with the board, would Noah's unwavering support be enough to weather the storm that was about to hit Skyline Networks? George took his seat at the head of the table, his eyes scanning the faces of the board members. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken accusations and barely concealed hostility. Sarah Thompson, who had spoken with George earlier, cleared her throat and began. George, we've called this meeting to discuss the future of Skyline Networks, she said, her voice steady but cold. After careful consideration, the board has come to a decision regarding your position as CEO. George's heart sank. He had known this was coming, but the reality of it still hit him like a punch to the gut. He glanced towards the door, half expecting to see Noah there, ready to offer silent support. But of course, Noah wasn't present for this meeting. This was something George had to face alone. We believe it's time for a change in leadership, Sarah continued. The majority of the board has voted for your removal as CEO, effective immediately. The words hung in the air, their weight crushing George's spirit. He looked around the table, searching for any sign of support, but most of the board members avoided his gaze. Only a few, those who had been with him from the early days of Skyline, met his eyes with a mix of sympathy and regret. I see, George said, his voice barely above a whisper. May I ask the reasons for this decision? Another board member, Michael Chen, spoke up. The recent decline in our stock performance is concerning, George. We feel that new leadership might be better equipped to navigate the challenges ahead. George nodded, a bitter smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He wanted to argue, to remind them of all he had done for Skyline, but he knew it would be futile. The decision had been made. As George left the boardroom, the reality of his situation began to sink in. He had just lost the company he had built from the ground up, the dream he had poured his heart and soul into for years. The weight of it all threatened to crush him. Noah was waiting by the car, his expression shifting from concern to alarm as he saw George's face. What happened? He asked, though he could guess the answer. George's voice was hollow as he replied, They voted me out, Noah. I'm no longer the CEO of Skyline Networks. Noah's face hardened, a mix of anger and determination in his eyes. This isn't right, he said. After everything you've done for this company. As they drove away from the Skyline offices, the impact of George's dismissal rippled through the company. Word spread quickly, and reactions were mixed. Some employees, particularly those in upper management who had been wary of George's unconventional leadership style, saw it as an opportunity for change. Others, especially those who had been with the company from its early days, were shocked and dismayed. In the following days, George retreated into himself, struggling to come to terms with the loss of his position and the betrayal he felt from the board. It was during this time that Noah's loyalty truly shone. He became not just George's driver, but his confidant, his support system, and his link to the outside world. Noah made it his mission to keep George informed about what was happening at Skyline. He reached out to employees who remained loyal to George, gathering information and relaying messages of support. Despite no longer being officially part of the company, Noah became a conduit for those who believed in George's vision and leadership. One evening, as they sat in George's living room, Noah finally voiced what he had been thinking for days. "George, this isn't over. There are people at Skyline who still believe in you. We can fight this." George looked up, a spark of his old fire returning to his eyes. "We? Noah, you don't have to get involved in this mess. It's my battle to fight." Noah shook his head firmly. "No, it's our battle. I told you before. We're in this together. And I meant it." As the days passed, it became clear that Noah's support wasn't just empty words. He worked tirelessly, coordinating with loyal board members and employees, gathering evidence of George's successful leadership, and strategizing ways to challenge the board's decision. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. Several board members who had voted against George began to have second thoughts. They saw in Noah's dedication and strategic thinking the same qualities that had made George such an effective leader. Noah James stood in the parking lot of Skyline Networks, his gaze fixed on the towering glass building that had been his second home for over a decade. The weight of recent events hung heavy in the air, but a spark of determination flickered in his eyes. As he watched employees file in for another day of work, a single question echoed in his mind. How could a company driver, with no formal business training, outmaneuver seasoned executives and save a multi-million-dollar corporation? With a deep breath, Noah steeled himself for the challenge ahead. His first order of business was to gather allies within the company. Years of friendly chats and shared lunches had given him a unique insight into the loyalties and motivations of Skyline's staff. He knew exactly who to approach first. Noah started with Sarah in accounting, a longtime employee who had always appreciated George's leadership style. As they talked in hushed tones by the water cooler, Noah could see the conflict in her eyes. "I want to help," she whispered, "but I can't risk my job, Noah. I've got kids to support." Noah nodded, understanding her hesitation. "I get it, Sarah, but we're not asking you to do anything that would jeopardize your position. We just need information, things that can help us prove George's value to the company." As the days passed, Noah's network grew. He became a conduit for information, carefully collecting evidence of George's successful leadership and the positive impact he'd had on Skyline Networks. But it wasn't just about gathering data. Noah found himself offering emotional support to those who felt lost without George's guidance. One afternoon, Noah overheard two executives discussing recent market shifts. A light bulb went off in his head. He rushed to George's house, excitement bubbling in his chest. "George," he said breathlessly, "I think I found something that could help us." George looked up from his laptop, curiosity piqued. Noah laid out what he'd heard, connecting it to a strategy George had proposed months ago but had been shot down by the board. "If we can show them that your idea would have prevented this downturn, it could be the proof we need," Noah explained. George's eyes widened as he realized the implications. "Noah," he said softly, "this is brilliant. But how did you even know about that strategy? You weren't in that meeting." Noah shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "I listened, George. I've always listened." As word of Noah's efforts spread, skepticism grew among some employees. "Who does he think he is?" one manager grumbled. "He's just a driver. What does he know about running a company?" But for every doubter, there were two supporters, people who had seen Noah's dedication over the years, who recognized the intelligence behind his unassuming demeanor. Slowly but surely, a coalition was forming. Noah's natural leadership began to shine through as he coordinated efforts to support George. He organized clandestine meetings, delegated tasks, and kept everyone motivated even when the odds seemed insurmountable. His calm demeanor and strategic thinking impressed even those who had initially doubted him. One pivotal moment came during a meeting with a group of loyal employees. As they discussed their next move, tensions ran high. Frustrations boiled over, and voices began to rise. Noah, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. "I know you're all scared," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But remember why we're doing this. It's not just about George. It's about the soul of this company. We've built something special here, something worth fighting for. And if we stand together, there's nothing we can't overcome." The room fell silent, everyone stunned by the passion and conviction in Noah's words. In that moment, they saw him not as a driver, but as a leader. As the days turned into weeks, Noah's efforts began to bear fruit. Whispers of discontent with the new leadership started to circulate. Board members who had voted against George began to question their decision. And through it all, Noah remained the steady hand guiding their efforts. With whispers of discontent growing louder, Noah saw an opportunity. But uncovering the truth behind George's ousting would require more than just loyalty. It would demand a keen eye for corporate intrigue and a willingness to risk everything. Noah gathered his team of loyal employees in a small conference room after hours. The air was thick with anticipation as they huddled around a whiteboard, ready to brainstorm ideas that could save Skyline Networks. Noah stood at the front, marker in hand, his usual calm demeanor tinged with determination. "All right, folks," he began. "We need to think outside the box here. What opportunities are we missing? What can we do differently that the board hasn't considered?" Ideas started flowing. Sarah from accounting suggested exploring new markets. "We've always focused on domestic clients," she pointed out. "What if we looked into international expansion?" Mike from IT chimed in. "We could leverage our existing technology to create new products, maybe something in the IoT space." As Noah jotted down ideas, he noticed a pattern emerging. Many of the suggestions were things George had proposed in the past, but had been shot down by certain board members. It was as if the team was channeling George's vision without even realizing it. As the brainstorming session continued, Noah's mind began to race. Why had these ideas been rejected before? And why were they suddenly seeming so promising now? The team's enthusiasm was infectious, but Noah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to George's removal than just poor stock performance. He decided to dig deeper. Over the next few days, Noah and his trusted allies began discreetly investigating the company's recent decisions. They pored over financial reports, board meeting minutes, and internal memos. Slowly, a disturbing picture began to emerge. It wasn't just about the stock prices or George's unconventional leadership style. There was a pattern of sabotage. Promising projects had been mysteriously underfunded. Lucrative contracts had fallen through at the last minute. And at the center of it all was one name that kept popping up: Victor Hawthorne, the board member who had been most vocal about removing George. Noah called an emergency meeting with his core team. "I think I know why George was really ousted," he said, his voice low. "Victor Hawthorne has been working behind the scenes to weaken the company. I believe he wants to drive down our value so he can buy a controlling stake at a discount." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just corporate politics anymore. It was a calculated attempt to steal the company George had built from the ground up. "We need proof," Sarah whispered. "Hard evidence that we can take to the other board members." Noah nodded. "That's where you all come in. We need to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. Every decision, every transaction, Every communication involving Hawthorne. If he's been manipulating things, we'll find the trail. The team sprang into action, each person leveraging their unique skills and access. Sarah dove into the financials, looking for discrepancies. Mike combed through emails and internal communications. Others reached out to contacts in partner companies, trying to piece together the puzzle of those failed contracts. As the days passed, evidence began to mount. Hawthorne had been in secret talks with competitors, promising them inside information in exchange for future considerations. He had deliberately sabotaged deals that would have boosted Skyline's value. And most damning of all, they uncovered a draft proposal for a leveraged buyout of the company, with Hawthorne as the primary beneficiary. The team worked tirelessly, often staying late into the night. Noah coordinated their efforts, piecing together the disparate threads of information into a coherent narrative. He was amazed at the dedication and skill of his colleagues. These were people who had been overlooked or underestimated, just as he had been. Yet here they were, working together to save the company they believed in. As they gathered their evidence, Noah couldn't help but reflect on the irony of the situation. He, a former driver with no formal business training, was leading a team to outmaneuver seasoned executives and save a multi-million-dollar corporation. It was a testament to George's leadership that he had fostered an environment where someone like Noah could rise to such a challenge. With their case built, Noah knew it was time to act. They couldn't go directly to the board. Hawthorne had too much influence there. Instead, they needed to appeal to the other shareholders, to show them how they had been misled. Noah called George to update him on their findings. "We've got him, George," he said, his voice filled with quiet triumph. "Hawthorne's been playing everyone for fools, but we've got the proof to bring him down." George was silent for a moment, then spoke with a mix of pride and determination. "You've done amazing work, Noah. All of you have. Now let's take back our company." As George and Noah prepared to reclaim Skyline Networks, a shocking revelation threatened to derail their plans. The depths of Victor Hawthorne's corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined. Noah's investigation had uncovered a web of deceit that stretched far beyond simple corporate maneuvering. Hawthorne's plan was audacious in its scope. He had systematically undermined Skyline's operations, deliberately tanking profitable projects and sabotaging key partnerships. His ultimate goal? To drive the company's value so low that he could swoop in with a leveraged buyout, essentially stealing the company for a fraction of its worth. But Hawthorne's ambitions didn't stop at mere financial gain. Evidence suggested he was willing to cross legal and ethical lines to achieve his goals. There were hints of insider trading, falsified financial reports, and even attempts to bribe government officials to overlook regulatory violations. Noah and George knew they had to act fast. They rallied their allies on the board and called for an emergency meeting. The atmosphere was tense as board members filed into the conference room, unaware of the bombshell about to be dropped. George stood at the head of the table, his face grim but determined. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we've called you here today because we've uncovered evidence of serious misconduct within our company." Noah stepped forward, laying out the evidence they had gathered. He presented financial documents showing discrepancies, emails revealing Hawthorne's secret communications with competitors, and the draft proposal for the leveraged buyout. As the scope of Hawthorne's actions became clear, the room erupted into chaos. Some board members expressed shock and outrage, while others, likely Hawthorne's allies, tried to dismiss the allegations as baseless. George raised his hand for silence. "We're not asking you to take our word for it," he said. "We've brought in independent experts to verify our findings." On cue, a team of legal experts and external auditors entered the room. They had been working around the clock to corroborate Noah and George's evidence. Their presence lent weight to the accusations, silencing even the most vocal of Hawthorne's supporters. But George and Noah had one more ace up their sleeve. They introduced an investigative journalist who had been quietly following the story for weeks. The journalist presented additional evidence, including testimonies from former employees and partners who had been pressured or manipulated by Hawthorne. As the meeting stretched into its third hour, the tide began to turn. Board members who had initially been skeptical now demanded answers. Hawthorne, cornered and desperate, lashed out with threats of legal action and veiled implications of dirt he had on others. But his bluster fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence. One by one, even his closest allies on the board began to distance themselves, realizing the sinking ship they were on. Outside the conference room, loyal employees gathered, anxiously awaiting news. They had put their trust in Noah, risking their careers to support his investigation. The tension was palpable as they whispered among themselves, speculating on what was happening behind closed doors. Inside, the board called for a vote. The result was unanimous. Victor Hawthorne was to be removed from his position immediately, and all evidence of his misconduct would be turned over to the proper authorities. As George and Noah emerged from the conference room, a hush fell over the waiting crowd. Then, seeing the smiles on their faces, a cheer erupted. It was a moment of triumph, not just for George and Noah, but for everyone who had believed in the true spirit of Skyline Networks. The cheers of triumph faded, but the real challenge was just beginning. Could Noah James, the former driver turned trusted advisor, truly reshape Skyline Networks from the ground up? His next decision would send shockwaves through the entire company. In the aftermath of Hawthorne's removal, George King knew it was time for a change. He called Noah into his office, a familiar scene that now held new weight. "Noah," George began, his voice filled with gratitude and respect. "I want to offer you a position again. This time, I'm not taking no for an answer." Noah hesitated, memories of his previous refusal flashing through his mind. But things were different now. He had proven his worth not just as a driver, but as a leader. With a nod, Noah accepted, understanding that this decision would alter the course of his life and the company's future. The news of Noah's promotion spread quickly through Skyline Networks. Some celebrated, seeing it as a well-deserved recognition of Noah's contributions. Others were skeptical, wondering how a former driver would fare in upper management. But Noah was determined to prove himself. In the weeks that followed, the dynamics of the new management team began to take shape. Noah brought a fresh perspective to the boardroom, often challenging long-held assumptions and pushing for more inclusive, decision-making processes. His practical experience and connection to employees at all levels proved invaluable. George, for his part, found himself reinvigorated by Noah's presence. Together, they formed a partnership that balanced visionary thinking with grounded practicality. The rest of the management team, initially wary, soon came to appreciate the new energy and ideas Noah brought to the table. The workplace atmosphere at Skyline Networks underwent a remarkable transformation. Noah's influence permeated throughout the company, fostering a more inclusive and collaborative environment. Employees who had once felt overlooked now found their voices heard and their ideas valued. Team-building exercises and open-door policies became the norm. The once rigid hierarchy began to soften, replaced by a culture that emphasized merit and innovation over titles and tenure. Laughter could be heard in the hallways, and a sense of camaraderie developed across departments. The positive changes at Skyline Networks didn't go unnoticed by the local community. City officials praised the company's renewed commitment to ethical business practices and community engagement. Local news outlets ran stories about the Skyline Renaissance, highlighting how a company could turn itself around through principled leadership. Community leaders were particularly impressed by Noah's rise through the ranks. His story resonated with many, serving as an inspiration to young people in the area. Skyline began receiving invitations to participate in career fairs and mentorship programs, further strengthening its ties to the community. The shift in focus at Skyline Networks had a profound effect on the team's morale and productivity. Employees who had been considering leaving now recommitted themselves to the company's mission. The renewed sense of purpose and pride was palpable in every department. This internal transformation began to attract attention from outside the company. Talented professionals who had previously overlooked Skyline now sought to join its ranks. Potential partners and clients, drawn by the company's positive reputation and innovative spirit, reached out to explore new opportunities. Noah's influence on the company's goals and values was substantial. He pushed for a more holistic approach to success, one that balanced profit with social responsibility. Under his guidance, Skyline launched initiatives focused on environmental sustainability and community development. The company's research and development team found new inspiration, tackling projects that aim to bridge the digital divide in underserved communities. These efforts not only opened up new markets, but also aligned with Noah's vision of technology as a tool for social good. As the months passed, Skyline Networks began to see tangible results from its new direction. Profits were up, employee satisfaction had skyrocketed, and the company was making headlines for all the right reasons. Noah's journey from driver to executive had become a symbol of the company's transformation. As the dust settled at Skyline Networks, the transformation was clear. Noah James, once just a driver, now stood as a key leader in the company. His journey from the background to the boardroom symbolized the change that had swept through the organization. George King, watching his friend and colleague in action, felt a deep sense of gratitude. "Noah," he said one day, "I don't think I've properly thanked you for everything you've done. You didn't just save the company, you helped me rediscover why we started it in the first place." The new Skyline was a different place. Employees from all levels felt heard and valued. The community saw the company as a force for good, not just another profit-driven corporation. As Noah looked out over the bustling office, he couldn't help but smile. This was more than just a job now. It was a mission, a chance to show that true leadership could come from anywhere, and that unity could overcome any obstacle.